I was 23 years old on my wedding night in Tehran, dressed in my bridal gown and preparing for the celebration, when Jesus Christ appeared to me in my room and told me I couldn't marry this man. 4 months I had been having dreams about a man in white who spoke of love and freedom, but on June 15, 2018, the night I was supposed to consummate my arranged marriage, he appeared so clearly that I knew I had to choose between the life my family had planned and the God who was calling me to himself. My name is Nazanin Rahimi. I was born in 1995 in Tehran into a traditional upper-middle-class Persian family. My father was a successful businessman in the textile industry, and we lived comfortably in northern Tehran's affluent neighborhoods. I grew up with private education, cultural refinement, and the expectation that I would eventually marry well and maintain our family's social standing. My childhood was pleasant but constrained. I attended excellent schools, learned English and French, studied music and art, and received education befitting a girl from good family. But underneath the privilege was constant awareness that my life had predetermined path. I would be educated to be cultured wife, marry someone my family approved, and fulfill the role of proper Persian woman. I was bright and curious, dreaming sometimes of university and career, but I understood these were unrealistic hopes. In my family's worldview, a woman's purpose was marriage and motherhood, not professional ambition. My role was to honor my family through appropriate marriage and produce the next generation. When I turned 21 in 2016, marriage discussions began. My parents started evaluating potential matches. Sons of business associates, young men from appropriate families, candidates who could provide security and maintain our social status. I understood this was how things worked and accepted that love was secondary to strategic compatibility. In late 2017, my parents announced they had found excellent match, Arash Tevakoli, a 32-year-old businessman who had inherited his father's successful import company. Arash was wealthy, well-connected, and came from respected family. The match was considered ideal by everyone except me. I met Arash during supervised courtship meetings and found him cold and controlling. He spoke about his business accomplishments constantly, treated me as acquisition to add to his portfolio, and made clear that he expected traditional submissive wife. When I tried expressing concerns to my parents, they dismissed them. Marriage wasn't about feelings, they explained. It was about security, family alliance, and social position. The engagement proceeded despite my reservations. Over 6 months, my family prepared for elaborate wedding. Expensive venue, hundreds of guests, designer gown, celebration befitting our family's status. I participated in the preparations feeling increasingly trapped but seeing no escape. Refusing marriage would bring shame on my family, break the engagement contract, and leave me with no alternative future. But something else was happening during those engagement months that I couldn't explain. I began having recurring dreams about a man in brilliant white who spoke to me about love, freedom, and choosing my own path. He never identified himself, but his presence brought peace unlike anything in my waking life. The dreams intensified as the wedding approached, becoming more vivid and frequent. I had been raised Muslim, though my family's practice was cultural rather than devout. We observed major holidays, maintained Islamic identity for social reasons, but religion wasn't central to our lives. These dreams didn't fit any Islamic framework I knew. I wondered if I was experiencing anxiety manifesting as religious visions. But the dreams continued, and the man in white kept speaking about freedom and choosing love over obligation. I didn't understand what the dreams meant or who this figure was. I had no idea that on my wedding night, he would appear not in dream but in undeniable reality, and that encounter would force me to choose between everything my family had planned and a God I had never truly known. The dreams began in January 2018, 3 months after my engagement to Arash and 5 months before the scheduled wedding. At first they were vague. I would see brilliant light and hear a voice speaking about love and freedom, but I couldn't make out specific words or see clear figures. As weeks passed, the dreams became more distinct. I began seeing the man in white more clearly, not detailed physical features, but a presence of overwhelming love and peace. He would speak to me about being valued as a person, about freedom from cultural chains, about choosing relationship based on love rather than obligation. The words confused me because they challenged everything I had been taught. In my culture, personal choice in marriage was selfish and individualistic. Duty to family, respect for tradition, and acceptance of arranged marriage were signs of maturity and wisdom. But this man in my dreams kept speaking about God's love for me personally, about my worth beyond what family determined, about freedom to choose my path. I tried dismissing the dreams as anxiety about upcoming marriage. Perhaps my subconscious was expressing fears I couldn't acknowledge while awake. But the dreams had quality that felt different from normal anxiety dreams. They left me with profound peace rather than agitation, and the message was consistent rather than chaotic. In March 2018, the man in white began identifying himself in the dreams. He said, "I am Jesus, the Son of God. I love you with love that will never fail. I am calling you to follow me and trust me with your future." This confused me deeply. I was Muslim, raised to believe Jesus was merely prophet, not divine. Why would I be dreaming about Jesus? I began secretly researching Christianity online using VPN to hide my browsing. I read gospel accounts and was struck by Jesus's treatment of women. He valued them as persons, defended them from religious oppression, treated them with dignity unprecedented in that culture. The contrast with my own experience of being treated as property to be transferred from father to husband was striking. I also read testimonies of Muslim women who had converted to Christianity after encountering Jesus in dreams. Their stories were remarkably similar to mine. Jesus appearing with message of love and freedom, calling them to follow him and often warning them about life decisions that weren't aligned with his plan. Many had experienced supernatural encounters that changed their lives completely. By April 2018, 2 months before my wedding, the dreams had become intense and frequent. Sometimes multiple times per week. Jesus would speak to me about his love, about freedom he offered, and increasingly about the marriage I was preparing for. He would say, "This is not the path I have for you. Trust me with your future." I became increasingly troubled. Was I really experiencing supernatural encounters with Jesus Christ, or was I having psychological breakdown from wedding stress? If these dreams were real divine communication, what was I supposed to do? Cancel my wedding and shame my family based on dreams? The idea seemed insane. But the dreams continued with such consistency and power that I couldn't dismiss them as mere anxiety. Something spiritual was happening, something beyond my psychological state. Jesus was calling me to himself, warning me about the marriage, and asking me to trust him even when I couldn't see how that trust would work out practically. As the wedding date approached, the dreams intensified. Jesus's messages became more urgent. "Do not go through with this marriage. It is not my will for you. Follow me instead." I was torn between obedience to family and obedience to what I increasingly believed was God's voice. The tension was unbearable. Then came my wedding night, June 15, 2018, when Jesus would appear not in dream but in reality so undeniable that I could no longer avoid the choice he was asking me to make. The wedding ceremony and reception on June 15, 2018, were everything my family had planned. Elaborate traditional Persian wedding with hundreds of guests, expensive venue beautifully decorated, traditional music and dancing, celebration befitting our family's status. I moved through it all feeling disconnected, as if watching someone else's wedding rather than living my own. The ceremony itself was surreal. I stood beside Arash as we went through traditional rituals, signed the marriage contract, and were pronounced husband and wife. I smiled for photographs, greeted guests, and played the role of happy bride while feeling hollow inside. The dreams about Jesus had become so frequent in preceding weeks that I felt I was betraying him by going through with this marriage. The reception lasted for hours. Speeches, traditional dances, elaborate meal, celebrations continuing late into the evening. Throughout it all, I kept thinking about the dreams, about Jesus's warnings, about the choice I was making by continuing with this marriage. But I didn't see any way out. The wedding was happening, hundreds of people were celebrating, I was already legally married. Finally, around midnight, the celebration wound down. Following Persian tradition, I was taken to a private room in the venue to change from my wedding gown into travel clothes before Arash and I would leave for our honeymoon. Family members helped me into the room, laughing and making traditional comments about wedding night, then left me alone to change. I stood before the full-length mirror in my elaborate wedding gown, looking at myself, the bride I had become despite all my doubts. Tears began falling as the reality hit me. I had married a man I didn't love, committed my life to someone who saw me as possession rather than person, and ignored what I increasingly believed was God's voice telling me this was wrong. Then, as I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I suddenly saw him standing behind me. Not in dream, not in vision, but present in the room with undeniable reality. Jesus Christ, the man in white from my dreams, was standing there radiating brilliant light and overwhelming love. Terror and awe filled me simultaneously. This was impossible. I was awake in a physical room, yet experiencing something supernatural. But the presence was so powerful, so real that I couldn't deny what I was seeing and feeling. Jesus was actually there. He spoke, and his voice filled the room, though I don't know if it was audible sound or communication directly to my spirit. Nazanin, I have been calling you for months. This marriage is not my will for you. You are mine, and I have different plans for your life. You must leave now, tonight, before it is too late. Trust me and follow me. I turned around physically, but the appearance had vanished. Yet the presence remained. The peace and love I had felt in the dreams filled the room. And with absolute certainty that transcended rational explanation, I knew this had been real divine encounter, not hallucination or imagination. Jesus had appeared to me on my wedding night and told me to leave immediately. The message was crystal clear. I was already married legally, but the marriage had not been consummated. If I left now tonight, there might still be possibility of annulment. If I went through with the wedding night, the marriage would be fully complete under both legal and religious standards. I faced the most critical decision of my life. Follow Jesus's clear direction and abandon my wedding night, walking away from everything my family had planned and arranged, or ignore the supernatural encounter and proceed with consummating the marriage, choosing family duty over divine calling? The choice had to be made immediately. Arash would be coming to collect me within minutes. I had perhaps 15 minutes to decide whether to follow Jesus or follow the path my family had determined for me. The encounter with Jesus lasted perhaps 2 minutes, but it shattered every doubt I had been carrying. This was not dream, not psychological stress, not imagination. Jesus Christ had appeared to me physically in that room and spoken with authority I couldn't deny. I had to choose immediately, follow him or proceed with the marriage. Terror and faith battled in my mind. If I left now, the consequences would be catastrophic. My family would be humiliated, Arash's family would be enraged, I would be disowned and potentially in physical danger. I had no plan, no resources, nowhere to go. But Jesus had said to trust him, and his presence had been so overwhelmingly real that I knew I had to obey. I quickly removed my wedding gown and put on simple clothes I had packed for the honeymoon trip. I took my phone, passport, some cash I had in my bag, and nothing else. I couldn't take time to gather belongings or make plans. Jesus had said to leave immediately, and I believed that timing was critical. I opened the door carefully and looked into the hallway. The venue was mostly empty now, with just a few remaining staff cleaning up. Most guests had departed, and my family and Arash's family were in other areas of the building. I walked quickly but not obviously panicked toward a side exit. A venue staff member saw me and asked if I needed help. I said I was going to get something from my car and would return shortly. He nodded and continued his work. I stepped outside into the Tehran night, leaving behind my wedding reception, my new husband, and my entire planned future. I had no specific escape plan, only certainty that I needed to follow Jesus's direction. I walked several blocks away from the venue before calling the one person I thought might help. Miriam, a university friend who had moved to Turkey and had once mentioned being interested in Christianity. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but she was the only person I could think of who might understand. Miriam answered, shocked to hear from me, even more shocked when I explained I had just fled my wedding reception because Jesus had appeared to me. But instead of thinking I was insane, she said she had become a Christian 6 months earlier and was connected with underground Iranian Christian network. She immediately began making calls to help. Within an hour, Miriam had connected me with Christians in Tehran who helped women escape religious persecution. They picked me up from a location I walked to and took me to a safe house. I spent that night, my wedding night, hiding in a stranger's home while my family and Arash's family frantically searched for the missing bride. The next morning my phone exploded with calls and messages. My mother was hysterical, my father was enraged, Arash was threatening legal action, and his family was promising revenge for the dishonor. I was called insane, possessed, ungrateful, and worse. The pressure to return was enormous, with promises of forgiveness mixed with threats of consequences. But I knew I couldn't go back. Jesus had appeared to me and called me to follow him. That supernatural encounter was more real than anything else in my life. I had made my choice and now I had to trust him completely with the consequences. Over the following days, the Christian network helped arrange my escape from Iran. With help from international organizations that assisted persecuted believers, emergency travel documents were obtained. Within a week of my wedding night, I was on a flight out of Iran to a country that offered asylum to Christian converts facing persecution. I arrived in a European country as refugee in late June 2018, just days after abandoning my wedding. Everything I had known, family, home, culture, security, was gone. I had left Iran with only the clothes I was wearing and documents the Christian network had helped me obtain. The transition was overwhelming and terrifying. But I also had something I had never possessed before: freedom to follow Jesus Christ openly. For the first time in my life, I could pray to him without hiding, read the Bible without fear, attend church without risk of persecution. The Jesus who had appeared to me on my wedding night was no longer a secret I had to conceal but the foundation of my new life. The first weeks were difficult. I grieved the loss of my family despite knowing I had made the right choice. My mother sent desperate messages begging me to return, promising that the marriage could be annulled and everything forgiven if I just came home. But I knew returning was impossible. I had publicly humiliated both families by fleeing, converted to Christianity, and broken cultural codes in ways that couldn't be easily forgiven. The church that welcomed me became my new family. They provided practical support, housing assistance, language classes, job training, but more importantly, they provided spiritual community. For the first time, I could worship Jesus openly with other believers who understood the cost of following him. I began studying the Bible intensively, discovering that the Jesus who had appeared to me was the same Jesus revealed in Scripture. The one who valued women, freed the oppressed, and called people to leave everything to follow him. The supernatural encounter made sense within the broader story of who Jesus was and how he worked in people's lives. My testimony of Jesus appearing on my wedding night and calling me to leave resonated powerfully with other Muslim women considering Christianity. Several reached out through underground networks asking if following Jesus was worth losing everything. I could tell them honestly that yes, knowing Jesus was worth more than family approval, arranged marriage, or comfortable security. Today, I work with organizations helping Iranian women escape forced marriages and religious persecution. My story of abandoning my wedding night has become testimony that encourages others facing impossible choices. I tell them that Jesus is worth losing everything for, that his plans are better than our family's plans, and that supernatural encounters with him are not just ancient stories but present reality. I have had no contact with my family since fleeing. They consider me dead spiritually and socially. Arash obtained annulment quickly, and both families worked to minimize public scandal from the wedding night abandonment. The marriage that was supposed to secure my future lasted less than 12 hours, but it accomplished something neither family intended. It became the moment when Jesus intervened directly to redirect my life. I lost my wedding, my family, my home, and my culture on June 15, 2018. But I gained Jesus Christ, eternal life, and freedom to live authentically as his beloved daughter. That trade, everything familiar for knowing him, was worth it. Jesus appeared to me on my wedding night and told me to follow him instead. I obeyed, and he has proven faithful to the trust he asked me to place in him.